I forgot two characters from 2006 because of how unimportant they were to me. But as some pointed out, they are standouts, so I have to mention them. One is Lelouch from Code Geass and the other is Gintoki from Gintama. Both are power fantasies, and despite their shows having serious topics from time to time, as a whole they are satirical imitations of older, far superior characters, namely Reinhardt and Rurouni Kenshin. That's why I initially ignored them, and you can't blame me when both of them have very little relevancy anymore. Who the hell cares about Little Lulu anymore? People remember the Yuffie massacre, the bullshit strategies, and the emotional ending that didn't make any sense. They don't care about him, as they do about the crazy things that are constantly happening around him, like Pizza Hut and playing chess by moving the king as your first move. Same thing with Gintoki. Nobody cares about his serious story. They were just watching the show so they can laugh with the shonen references. Proof of which is how the show stopped being popular when the big three ended and the plot became serious. The next 4 years had some pretty good memorable characters. Balsa and Kyoko are two of the very few respectable women in the medium. Dynamic, smart, strong, not sexualized, not chained to the role of a romantic interest, and not defined by some fucked up feminism agenda. Too bad we don't have more like them. On the other side of the only remaining gender, Edward and Watashi are males with depth and development, not ridiculed by Pizza Hut or shonen references. The next 8 years, on the other hand, were fairly miserable for a snob like myself, because the most memorable ones were power fantasies and self-inserts with shallow theme exploration. Just have someone who is very strong or very smart, slap on a superficial drama, and you're done. It's a complete disconnect between popular and well-written. The only exception was 2019, where I found Askeladd to be the best character as a very memorable antagonist in the best anime of that year. No, it wasn't Demon Slayer, and Tanjiro is a freaking piece of white toast. And that's it with the standout characters. Since I had very little to say about this last part, let's make a comparison to see which years didn't have the best characters of the year in the best anime of the year. Because that was the norm up until 2000. The best anime usually had the best characters. There are exceptions though, because sometimes the charisma of a character surpasses the overall quality of the show he's part of. More specifically, despite ranking Devilman as the worst anime of 1972, it has the most interesting main character. It doesn't show much in this adaptation because it's horrible and doesn't follow the source, but compared to everything else that came out that year, there is no competition. So yes, it's a case where the best character is in the worst anime. The next one is 1978, where anime of the year is Future Boy Conan, a fine action-adventure for its time, but the best character is Captain Harlock. Despite having plot continuity and great action scenes, the Conan cast is typical and ends up losing to this chad of a space pirate. Yes, his show doesn't have much plot continuity and his origin changes in every iteration, but look at him, he's oozing masculinity! In 1981, the anime of the year for me was Ulysses 31 for being a great space horror for its time. However, the best character is Lam from Yurusei Yatsura. Yes, she's only a proto-tsundere in what is now a typical plotless school comedy, but there isn't much competition from someone else. I like the manliness of Ulysses, but he's pretty bland as a personality. Even a typical tsundere has more character than him. In 1990, the anime of the year was Lodoss War for capturing the essence of what D&D is like. In a very dry and low-budget way, but it was the middle of the economic depression, what can you do? The best character was Nadia from Secret of Blue Water. She had so much to her backdrop and personality, and up until the midpoint she was great. Then the plot became a mess, which is why it lasted to the run-of-the-mill Lodoss War. But as far as characters go, Nadia is great compared to the generic character classes of a D&D session. In 1996, the anime of the year was Escaflowne, one of the best isekai ever. Its characters, though, were not nearly as interesting as the dramatic backdrop of Rurouni Kenshin. The reason his show is not the best is because the last third is horrible fillers, and the actual last arc was never animated. As far as characters go, the show is better than Escaflowne. In 1999, the anime of the year is One Piece, but the best character is Onizuka. One Piece is the best adventure anime ever, but its silly-looking characters are not that relatable when you compare them with an ex-delinquent who becomes a teacher and gives life lessons to hopeless people. You get the logic by now, so let's speed things up now that we got to the double O's, and almost every year here on doesn't have the best characters in the best show. Notice how anime of the year is the one with the most elaborate plot that actually does a lot with its premise. But the characters in that show are usually not as memorable as those of a different show, which although doesn't have the most elaborate plot, its cast is far more enjoyable or multi-layered. Basically, I always place the plot over the characters, and even then I still care more about that than the pretty colors, which is the only thing most authors care about. I need to make a series of videos about that next.